If you've ever lost someone without an explanation, if silence ever wounded more than words, then this story is for you. Now, let me tell you about Nathan. Nathan had been repairing things around the house since early evening, moving from one small task to the next with restless determination. Before I unfold the rest of this night, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It really does help more than you know, and if you're drawn into stories like this, I want you here for every one of them. Also tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Are you in a small town where the evenings fall slow and gentle, or in a city where the lights never quite go dark? A loose hinge, a flickering bulb, a drawer that never sealed properly. None of them were urgent. None of them truly mattered. But keeping his hands occupied kept his mind from wandering, and wandering was dangerous. Because when Nathan's mind slowed down, it always returned to the same place. The same absence, the same unanswered questions, the same name he tried not to speak aloud anymore. Sarah. The kitchen was dimly lit, wrapped in that familiar amber glow that made everything feel warmer than it actually was. The quiet was broken only by the soft clinking of dishes as his mother, Carol, stood at the sink washing plates one by one. She moved slowly, deliberately, the way someone does when they're exhausted but pretending they aren't. Nathan noticed it. He always noticed it. Her shoulders drooped just slightly. Her breathing wasn't rushed, but it wasn't relaxed either. And though her lips held a gentle smile whenever she glanced his way, her eyes told a different story, one filled with worry she never voiced. Nathan tightened the final screw on the cabinet and stepped back, testing it once more. It held firm, something solid, something that stayed. He wiped his hands on an old rag and leaned against the counter, exhaling through his nose. It had been over a year since Sarah departed. Over a year since his life had split cleanly into a before and an after, and still it felt like yesterday. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't accused. She hadn't even wept. She had simply said she needed to go. No explanation. No argument. No closure. Just gone. The silence in the kitchen pressed against his chest. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy, the kind of silence that carried grief in its bones. And in that stillness, Nathan realized something that made his throat tighten. His mother had been carrying this house on her shoulders. Her own worries. His heartbreak. The absence of laughter that once filled these rooms. Without thinking, without planning, he stepped behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her shoulders. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't sadness. It was gratitude for the meals she still prepared, for the questions she didn't push, for holding everything together while he quietly fell apart. Carol stiffened for a brief second, startled by the sudden warmth. Then slowly, she leaned back into him. Her hands remained under the running water, fingers trembling just slightly. Nathan smiled faintly, but then she let out a breath. Not a sigh, not relief, a shaky, fragile breath that felt like it carried months of weight with it. Nathan pulled back just enough to see her face, and that's when he knew something was wrong. Her expression wasn't sad. It was conflicted, tender, frightened, burdened, like someone standing at the edge of a truth they'd been avoiding for too long. "Nathan," she whispered. Her voice trembled in a way he had never heard before. "There's something you need to know." His heart jumped, not with fear, but confusion. That sharp, unsettling feeling that comes right before life changes direction. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. Even though the floor beneath him suddenly felt unstable, Carol turned off the faucet. The kitchen grew quieter. She dried her hands slowly, as if delaying the moment would somehow make it easier. "Not here," she said softly. "Sit with me." And in that moment, Nathan understood this wasn't about the past in a casual way. This wasn't a forgotten detail or a harmless memory. This was something deeper. Something connected to the ache he carried every day. As they moved toward the small dining table, the air felt charged, like every quiet moment of the past year had been leading them here. Nathan sat down, his thoughts racing, but his body still. He didn't know what he was bracing for, only that whatever she was about to say would change something forever. And in that breath before the truth, he felt it. That faint pull of fate, like everything was finally about to make sense. Or fall apart. Or both. Carol sat across from Nathan at the small dining table, her hands folded tightly together, as if she were afraid they might betray her if she let them move freely. The steam from the teacups between them had already begun to fade, curling weakly into the air before disappearing entirely. The warmth that should have been comforting now felt forgotten, neglected, much like the truth she had been holding inside her for far too long. She didn't meet his eyes at first. Instead, she stared at the table's surface, tracing invisible lines in the worn wood with her gaze, gathering the courage she had postponed for months. Nathan waited. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. But inside, everything felt tight. his chest, his throat, his patience. Every instinct told him that whatever she was about to say had something to do with Sarah. The name hovered between them like a ghost. Neither of them dared to speak it aloud. Finally, Carol lifted her eyes. They were glossy, not with dramatic tears, but with something quieter. Regret that had aged, love tangled with fear. The expression of a mother who had tried to protect her child and wasn't sure if she had done the right thing. "I've been watching you," she said gently. Nathan stiffened. Ever since she left, she continued before he could respond, her voice steady but fragile underneath. She said she had seen him wake up every morning pretending to be okay. Seen him go to work, come home, repair things around the house, and avoid any conversation that might crack him open. "I saw how you smiled when people asked how you were," she whispered, "and how that smile disappeared the moment you thought no one was looking." Nathan swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to tell her he was fine, that he had moved on, that it didn't hurt anymore. But Carol shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "Don't do that? Not with me?" The words stopped him cold. "This isn't just about heartbreak," she continued. "It's about a choice I made because I thought it was the right one at the time." Her hand moved toward the drawer beside her chair. Nathan's eyes followed it. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the handle as if touching it would make everything real. Then she opened it. The soft sound of wood sliding against wood felt unbearably loud. From inside she pulled out an envelope, old, wrinkled, worn at the edges like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. Nathan's heart stuttered. Something about it felt familiar. Not because he recognized it, but because his body reacted before his mind could catch up. Carol placed it on the table between them. The paper looked fragile, almost delicate, like it had absorbed too much emotion to remain strong. "This came a week after Sarah left," she said, her voice dropping lower. "It was addressed to you." Nathan stared at the envelope. A letter from Sarah. His mind struggled to process the words. "A letter?" he repeated faintly. "You mean she wrote to me?" Carol nodded. "She came by when you weren't home," she explained. She was broken, Nathan, crying so hard she could barely speak. His hands clenched into fists under the table. "Why didn't you give this to me?" he asked. The question wasn't angry. It was wounded. Carol took a shaky breath. "She begged me not to," she admitted. "She said she wasn't strong enough to face you. That if she heard your voice, she would lose the resolve to do what she believed she had to do." Nathan's chest tightened painfully. "She said she didn't want you to think she disappeared without caring." Carol continued. "But she also believed that reading the letter too soon would only hurt you more. And you believed her?" Nathan asked. Carol's eyes filled. "I believed she might come back," she whispered. "And I thought if she did, maybe this letter would never need to exist." Silence swallowed the room. She confessed she had carried the weight of that decision every single day, that she replayed the moment over and over, wondering if protecting him had actually taken something away from him instead. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid of reopening your wounds if the letter didn't bring comfort." Nathan reached for the envelope. The paper trembled in his hand. It felt impossibly light, like something so thin couldn't possibly hold answers big enough to matter. But he knew better. All the sleepless nights, all the unanswered questions, all the moments he replayed their last conversation, searching for meaning that never came. Everything had narrowed to this. He slid a finger under the flap, hesitating. His heart pounded loudly in his ears. Whatever waited inside would change how he remembered the past year, and maybe how he understood himself. Slowly, carefully, he unfolded the letter. But before his eyes could land on the first line, before he could read even a single word, a knock echoed through the house. Sharp, firm, unexpected. Both of them froze. The sound wasn't aggressive, but it was deliberate, the kind of knock that demanded to be acknowledged. Carol's head snapped toward the front door. Nathan stood abruptly, the letter still clutched in his hand. Then came a voice, soft, uncertain, familiar in a way that made his blood run cold and his heart race simultaneously. "Nathan, are you there?" "Sarah." Nathan's feet refused to move. His mind screamed at him to walk toward the door, to open it, to finally face the person who had haunted his every thought for over a year. But his body remained frozen, anchored by disbelief. Carol rose slowly from her chair, her eyes darting between Nathan and the door, unsure whether to intervene or step back. "Nathan," she whispered. "It's her." He knew. He knew before she even said it. The voice had been enough. That particular timbre, that hesitant cadence, it had lived inside his memory for 13 months, replaying in quiet moments when he least expected it. The knock came again, softer this time, almost pleading. "Please." Sarah's voice called through the door. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I need to explain. I need you to understand." Nathan looked down at the letter still gripped in his hand. The words she had written a year ago, never delivered, never read, and now she was standing on the other side of that door, carrying the same words in her throat. He moved. One step, then another. The hallway felt longer than it had ever been, each footfall echoing against the walls like a heartbeat. When he reached the door, his hand hovered over the handle. He could feel her presence through the wood, could almost hear her breathing, and for a moment he considered not opening it. Considered protecting himself from whatever pain waited on the other side. But then he remembered the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, the hollow ache that never truly faded. He had spent a year wondering why. Tonight he would finally know. He opened the door. Sarah stood in the dim porch light, her face illuminated by the soft glow spilling from inside. She looked different, thinner. Her eyes carried shadows that hadn't been there before. Her hair was shorter, falling just past her shoulders instead of cascading down her back the way he remembered. But it was still her. Still the woman who had walked away without a word. Still the woman he had never stopped loving, no matter how hard he tried. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. Her eyes dropped to the letter in his hand, and something shifted in her expression, recognition, fear, relief, all tangled together. "You have it," she whispered. Nathan nodded slowly. "I was about to read it," he said, "right before you knocked." Sarah's breath caught. "Maybe," she said quietly. "It's better if I tell you myself?" She asked if she could come inside. Not to stay, just to explain. Nathan stepped aside without a word. They sat in the living room across from each other, the same distance that had defined their final conversation a year ago. Carol had retreated to the kitchen, giving them privacy, though Nathan could feel her presence lingering nearby, protective and watchful. Sarah's hands trembled as she clasped them together in her lap. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I left because I was diagnosed with something I didn't understand, something I was terrified to burden you with." Nathan's heart clenched. "What do you mean?" he asked. She explained everything. The strange symptoms she had hidden from him. The doctor's appointments she attended alone. The diagnosis that had shattered her. A condition that required extensive treatment, one that carried no guarantees. "I convinced myself that leaving was protecting you," she said. "That watching me deteriorate would destroy you. That you deserved a life without hospitals and uncertainty and grief." Her voice cracked. "But I was wrong, Nathan. I was so wrong." She described the months of treatment, the isolation, the nights she spent reading his name on her phone, desperate to call but too ashamed to reach out. "I wrote that letter the day after I left," she continued. "I gave it to your mother because I couldn't face you. I thought the words on paper would be easier than saying them out loud." She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. But nothing about this was easy. Nothing. Nathan sat in silence, absorbing every word. The anger he expected to feel never came. Instead, there was only a deep, profound, and tender. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked finally. "Why didn't you let me choose?" Sarah's eyes met his. "Because I loved you too much to watch you suffer," she whispered. "And I was too afraid to believe you would stay." The room fell quiet. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she walked through the door. He saw the exhaustion, the fear, the hope she was barely allowing herself to feel. And he understood something he hadn't before. She hadn't left because she didn't care. She had left because she cared too much, and didn't know how to let him carry the weight with her. He rose from his seat and crossed the space between them. Sarah watched him approach, her breath shallow, her eyes searching his face for any sign of what he was feeling. He knelt in front of her and took her hands in his. "I spent a year wondering what I did wrong," he said quietly. "A year trying to fill the space you left behind. A year convincing myself that I would eventually stop missing you." His voice broke slightly, "But I never did. And I never would have." Sarah's tears fell freely now, streaking down her face in silent rivers. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she whispered. "I just needed you to know the truth. I needed you to understand that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done, and the greatest regret I'll ever carry." Nathan squeezed her hands. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. "I don't know if we can rebuild what we had. But I do know one thing." He lifted her chin gently, meeting her gaze. "I would rather walk through uncertainty with you than spend another day wondering what could have been." That night, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. No promises were made. No declarations exchanged. But something had shifted. A door that had been sealed for a year was finally open. And for the first time since she left, Nathan felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. hope. Carol watched them from the kitchen window, a quiet smile forming on her lips. She had carried that letter for over a year, weighted by guilt and second-guessing. But perhaps, she thought, some truths are meant to arrive in their own time. Perhaps healing doesn't follow schedules. Perhaps love, real love, finds its way back, no matter how far it wanders. And as Nathan reached for Sarah's hand in the darkness, both of them fragile, both of them uncertain, both of them willing to try, Carol understood that the hardest part was over. The silence had finally been broken. And whatever came next, they would face it together. If this story moved something inside you, let me know in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear that love sometimes returns when we least expect it. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this remind us that even in our darkest chapters, the next page might hold everything we've been waiting for. Thank you for being here.